Welcome, everybody. I am excited for this. We have been wanting to talk about biotransformation for a while, and we've got a real expert tonight. We've got Veronica Vega, the Director of Product Development for award-winning brewery Deschutes. And we're going to be talking about the details of biotransformation. That has seemed to eluded us so far. But Veronica's stepped up to the plate, and we're going to hear a lot of interesting details. I'm Doug Piper, and I'm with the Gourmet Brewing Channel out of Greenville, South Carolina. And I want to really thank you so much for spending time with Veronica and myself. I know there's lots of other things you could be doing, but they're not things too much better than having beer with a subject matter expert. Not me, but Veronica Vega, the product development the director of product development for Deschutes. Here at Gourmet Brewing, we try and make your day a little more delicious, one sip at a time. So I want to bring up Veronica and tell you a little bit about her. There we go, I hope. There we go. Well, hello, Veronica. I'm glad to see you here. Everybody in the audience, please write in the chat just how much you appreciate Veronica volunteering, probably over 2 hours tonight, and she's been preparing. So just write in the chat how much you appreciate her being here, because she's been working some weeks to get this all together. And I want to thank Julia Hertz. For Julia, thank you very much for connecting us, because it wouldn't have happened without you. Now, Veronica, I'd like to tell everybody a little bit about who you are, but how are you first?
Oh, so good. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Well, you have quite a bio, a BS in biology, and a couple of years at the national parks. I hope you'll touch on that, because that sounds like a great job, but there's only one job better, and that's working at a brewery, and you've been there 15 years. And what I love about your story is you worked your way up. I guess you would call that from the bottom, where you went from a tour guide to a production brewer, a head brewer, and now you're the first Latina brewmaster, and now the director of product development. Wow, that's quite a story.
Thanks so much for that kind introduction. It's been quite a ride. I can't believe it's been 15 years, but it's been, there's really no industry like this one where you can constantly learn, and, what's more fun than that?
Well, that's what I love, and I love the collaborative aspect of the breweries. I spent my first career in aerospace, and a competitor was a competitor.
Right, exactly.
And I realize with breweries there are competitors and there's competition, but I see a lot more collaboration between breweries, and I just love that. Well, Veronica, I want to tell everybody what we're doing and come back to you in just a moment. Is that okay?
Perfect. Yep. Sounds good.
All right. Now, for those of you that are first-timers, and there's always a lot of first-timers, these are free monthly events that we do with subject matter experts. It's actually our 65th event, and that's thanks to teamwork from people like we mentioned Julia Hertz. She connected Veronica and I. Luke Pernodo is helping with the copywriting, and those of you there, I had a spelling error. Reed caught that out there. I need that kind of help, so thank you, Luke. Whit Lanning is helping me out with a lot of different things, but in particular, you'll see tonight the glassware, and he's with Burning Blush and Mills River. These are all crowd-funded events via Patreon, and I want to shout out to Joe Hertz for supporting Gourmet Brewing Channel for over 2 years. Now, he's been homebrewing for over 20 years. He homebrews beer, wine, and mead, and he is looking forward to getting back to judging again in Florida. And Joe, I am with you on that one. I've only done, I did 2 last year, so I'm looking forward to one. And actually, I plan to be at GABF. So for those of you that are going to be at GABF, I hope to see you there judging. Now, We support these through Patreon, and the link down there at the bottom center of the page can take you there. So if you'd like to be part of the team and support these events, you can click there and explore other ways that you can support these programs. And just some quick logistical things. The follow button in the upper right-hand corner, I think it's maybe about there. Click on that. And what that does is I do just kind of spontaneous events that are unannounced. But when I'm talking to somebody like Veronica, a lot of times we'll just go live and carry the conversation. If you have clicked the follow button, you'll get a notification. You don't get spammed, you don't get extra email, nothing. Just click on that follow, and you'll get a notification that I'm gone live. And you can either catch it live and ask questions, or you can watch it later. Refreshing the browser solves most technical issues. You can reduce the resolution by clicking the gear in the lower right-hand corner. Please share in the chat where you're from, and I think a great way to do it is to share your LinkedIn link. You can submit questions in the Ask a Question field, and please answer our brief poll. I do these programs and find guests that you want me to prioritize. So I've got, I think, 4 poll questions there. That helps me figure out who our next guests are. And also, for those of you that have chosen auto registration, that really helps. So please always check that box. And if anybody is interested in a virtual speaking or literal speaking opportunity, I do both. And I also do private virtual events. So if anybody's got one coming up, wants to do a tasting, I'm here to help. Now, speaking of things coming up, we got some really neat things. And our guest next week will be Aaron Walls. Aaron actually is going to be on Shark Tank tomorrow. How about it? That is cool. So Aaron has actually been on our program once before. If you check out Shark Tank tomorrow, you'll see him on there again. And he's going to be talking about myths, boiling and oxygenating. And Aaron has a really neat perspective. May 20th is open. So if anybody's got a suggestion for a speaker, I'll be scrambling to get one. But if you've got a suggestion, please put it there in the chat, or most of you have my email address. Phil Markowski is going to be on May 27th, and that's a good lead up. Well, Phil, if everybody knows, that's Farmhouse Ales author. And Phil is going to be talking about saisons as we continue that subject. And that's a great lead in for Olivier Declercq from Brasserie DuPont. And we're going to be hearing from them about Saison DuPont. So with that, let's get back to why you're here. Veronica, everybody's tired of hearing me talk. They want to hear from you.
Oh, well, thanks so much, Doug, and welcome everybody. I see people from all over the place. También quiero decir bienvenidos a la audiencia de Latinoamérica. I just wanted to welcome everyone. I hear there's a Latin American audience too, so this isn't a bilingual presentation, but I just wanted to quickly say hello to all our friends out there tuning in. Yep, so I love how you titled this, Doug. You brought up the hop magic, and I want to touch on that for a second because that's what we want our customers to think. We want them to think it's just like all magic that we're doing down in the brew house, but we know that it is science and practical trial and error that gets us to understand where to put hops for our hoppy beers in order to have the most impact, the most flavor. It's the right hop, the right place, the right time, right? So we will be talking a lot about biotransformation, but I also just want to talk about overall such a wide variety of hop products that are out there, and things that we have learned at Deschutes on within our fresh family. So that's our IPA portfolio. Bringing in our hop selection techniques, selecting, where to put certain hops in the recipe development, that sort of thing. So Doug has the lineup there. I think we should probably crack a beer even to start, right?
Was my hint that obvious?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, so I'm going to put it on the overhead camera first because I love the labels and I think yours are particularly attractive. So I have the right one, right?
Yes, sir. Fresh squeezed IPA is what I wanted to start with. I want to tell the story of fresh squeezed, but you're going to give us that pour, right? And if
I
anyone out
am.
there has a fresh squeeze, this is the time.
You ready for the pour?
Sure.
Okay. I am getting that ready. Now, I'm going to concentrate on not spilling it so you can concentrate on describing everything we're going to experience here.
Right. So as you get it into that glass, I think the first thing that you'll notice is, of course, the color. Right. It's a really nice, rich malt color. And what we wanted with fresh squeezed is just a beautiful balance between the Citra mosaic and the malt bill. We have a brewer that describes this beer as a grapefruit muffin, and that muffin is coming through in this malt. So the malt bill for fresh squeezed is pretty basic, just 2-row Munich, some C75. And then the nose on fresh squeeze, you're going to get a lot of passion fruit and obviously citrus, big citrus. This beer was, inspired and started with Citra as the hop. So that's really the story of fresh squeezed. We were doing most of our recipe development when fresh squeeze came to play in our pubs. And what we would do is get these experimental varieties from hop breeders or hop brokers, and then brew single hop beers at the pub and see what our customers thought and see what we thought. So we had this base recipe and it had this caramel malt. So it wasn't as scientific as it could be, right? Because we needed to make a sellable beer too. But at the time, Citra was experimental variety 384. And the brewer at the time, the name just came out. It's like, oh my gosh, this hop smells like fresh squeezed juice. It's amazing. So that all came very easily. The name and obviously our customers really, really loved this beer. I remember being a production brewer at the time, and we were testing Citra and going up to Portland to the pub to taste it. And what really struck me with Citra is its impact. So obviously so many different hops, people know that they provide a different flavor, but Citra is like a wallop of flavor. And what we learned very quickly with Citra is that it's very lot dependent. So when I went up to Portland and tasted, the second batch of fresh squeezed, it tasted very different. It was very catty. And we know that Citra, is rich in the thiol for MMP, and it brings up this catty aroma, which can, to some, if it's overly catty, it can be off-putting. But in the right amount, it adds complexity and kind of elevates that citrus character. So Doug, yeah. What are you getting in that nose? I love getting other people's, descriptors, because I said passion fruit and citrus, but I want to hear your descriptors.
I mean, it's really like a bowl of citrus fruit. There's just a myriad of wonderful aromas. I just love it. And it really fills the room. It's the best part when I open it. But it's, there's certainly some grapefruit, but there's some passion fruit, probably a little mango. I get a little bit of malt. It's and I love the color. It's beautiful. I just love a beer that has some nice color in the head, nice tan head, kind of a sea foam, and it's it started out with probably 3 fingers, but it's holding on to 1 finger pretty doggone well. Now I want to try it.
Yeah, while you do that, I see a question in the chat. It was C75 for the malt, the caramel malt that we bring into fresh squeezed. It's really one of the beers that we do want to keep that malt profile. In our other IPAs, we have, a much lighter malt profile, but with fresh squeeze, I think it really works. There's like, when you taste it, there's almost like an explosion of flavor in your palate, and I don't believe you can just say that that's the Citra hop. It's the synergy with our house yeast. This is 1187, if you can believe it. And I love that we use 1187 in this, because no brewer is going to copy us. Because it's just a yeast strain that can be somewhat difficult to work with. But boy, do we know this yeast. This is our house strain from the beginning. So over time, we've gotten to know it very well.
That is really fresh. Does that say April 3rd?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I switched before you had a chance to look. Oh,
Yep,
April
absolutely.
5th. I don't know if it's a 3 or a 5. Either one.
No,
that is really fresh, and it just tastes like it. I am just always astounded the difference fresh makes, and certainly with a hoppy beer, it makes a huge difference. But it is just fabulous when you can get one that fresh.
Right, and the kind of aroma trajectory that I get from fresh squeezed is that the caddy is there when it's very, very fresh, and that falls off first. And then it's tropical, very tropical. You're probably in the tropical zone. As it starts aging, the tropical drops to a more citrus forward expression of hop aroma. And so this is whole leaf Citra mosaic. And in the fresh squeezed recipe, this is not a dry hopped beer. So that's why I wanted to start out with this. I know we're going to talk about yeast and fermenter hopping, but I wanted to start with fresh squeezed as an example that you don't have to dry hop all your beers. This is an example of the right hop in the right form for the right beer. So this is Citra mosaic whole leaf hops. And in our brew house, we utilize a hop strainer, and we use a process called the second pass. So it goes through the hop strainer to the whirlpool, and then we can go back to the hop strainer for whole hop hopping, and then to the fermenter. So that's kind of, the magic behind fresh squeezed. And when you think of a hop being able on the hot side to provide that much aroma and flavor, it might seem magical, right? But I want to show a graph that I recently was shared by Scott Janish. So if you aren't following Scott Janish's work, oh my gosh, he just brings in so much hop research into and compiles it in his blog. But I want to show you this graph here. Okay, am I sharing?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Go to that bar, click on that bar at the top of your screen, and then you should see something that looks like a computer screen and an arrow jumping out of it. Ah, I see it. Wait a minute. Oops, you were there, and I was going to click on it and make you full screen.
I got it. Okay.
Yeah, this is different than Zoom, so there we go. I'm going to bring that full screen.
Okay. This graph is so cool. I have to give credit to Yakima Chief Hops. This is from a webinar. If you go to their website, you can find the webinar that is on, I think it's titled Sulfur. And I have this credited at the end too, so I'll send you this resource. But when you look at this idea that they call survivables, these are hop aroma compounds that if used on the hot side, they survive through the process. So if you look at where Mosaic is here, the second one, and Citra. So these are the highest, the hops with the highest amount of geraniol, the highest amount of, all these different hop compounds that you see down at the bottom, linalool. And so this is like the science backing why that Citra and Mosaic used in the brew house only in fresh squeeze can provide that aroma, right? So not every hop can be used in the hot side like this. Certainly Azacca, I have by trial and error tried to use it on the hot side to make a passion fruit IPA. And in sensory, when we tasted it next to fresh squeeze had more passion fruit. And it's just because, it's the right hop at the right place. So I'm going to escape out of here. And I think, Doug, you're giving me a clue here to maybe get into the next beer. Was that a little hint?
No, you got more time. If that's a natural point, that's great. Actually, since I was off screen, it gave me a minute to be distracted so I could line it up and get it in focus. But
yeah. So I mean, really, it is really what I wanted to share with Fresh Squeeze, as starting out with an example of a beer that is all hot side hopped, and move into examples of beers that bring hops into the fermenter. And that's where we can introduce this idea of biotransformation. So in thinking about what widely available commercial beer, was very inspirational to me. And Two Hearted is definitely up there. And I reached out to my friend John Mallett, who I believe is here, and asked him if we could use this as a
We have another Zoom bomb. John, would you come on screen? Let's see. Hopefully it will work.
Well, while we're waiting for him, I looked on the website to see if we could use this as a example of a beer that does utilize biotransformation. You've been doing it for 20 years, John.
Yeah, longer.
So
and I thought you were just a malt expert.
I like making beer. I like drinking beer. I like hanging out with great people. This is awesome.
Well, in your email to me, I just loved not only your description of your fermenter and how you went about learning how adding the hops during fermentation, adding Centennial hops during fermentation gives Two Hearted, the beautiful aroma that it has.
Yeah, I mean, we've got, at Bell's, we've been making beer for a long time, and Two Hearted was made before I got to Bell's, and there's been some, since I got there, maybe there's a little bit of tweaks that have happened. But originally we started making that beer in these sort of open fermenters, pretty wide and shallow, very, very shallow conical bottoms. And one of the way we looked at it was maybe this is providing an opportunity to give additional surface area to hops, because drop hops in a tall thin fermenter, they drop to the bottom, and what do you got? A plug of hops in the bottom, and so these are maybe spread out a little more. And as we grew and built better fermentation vessels, we really wanted to keep with that. And I will tell you that at one point, as we're growing, I think, oh man, we're running out of space. Maybe we'll try and make some Two Hearted in a different tank. And there is nothing like the feedback you get at the bar from somebody who is a diehard beer drinker of your stuff, saying, "What'd you do to my beer?" And everything from, we've seen this with hop crop changes or hop, different ways of processing hops. You're like, oh no, we need to be going in this direction. And so, for us, when we're throwing these hops into the fermenter, they're sitting in these wide, shallow tanks. They're going in during fermentation, and we notice a real difference between, I'm sure, Veronica, you know so much about this, of like when and how long and temperatures really affect what you extract from the hops selectively. And then further, by sort of biotransformation. And everybody's talking about dry hop creep. This is something that we've been looking at a long time ago. Like, why is the beer changing? Like, and doing some investigations, and not all research is put out. We put out a lot of research, but not all research is put out. And so it was good to be able to stabilize the process, make great beer, and now finally like be sharing that stuff. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. Doug, did you want to pour out some Two Hearted, and anyone else in the audience, if you have a Two Hearted in your hand, now is the time.
So now, John, you have Two Hearted, right? Well, you've got the light.
Yeah, well, that's a separate brand. We've been making Two Hearted for a while, and the number of comments you get from folks who are drinking beer and saying, I love drinking Two Hearted, but you drink a couple of them 7% puppies, and maybe you're not piloting the car home. It would be great to get, those hop flavors and something else. And that's a challenge. I mean, that, we have our pilot, research and development brewer, Andy Farrell at Bell, is incredibly talented, but trying to get, how do you get these flavors in something that's got a lot less, calories, alcohol, how do you build body? How do you build the hop, the flavors? So it's a little bit different, but we want to stay true to that, that sort of brand trajectory.
Veronica, I am going to knock you off the screen for just a minute. So we'll have just John and his beer on the screen as we pour it. John, is there anything?
Can't Veronica be with it? Come on, man. He's the star. I mean, Vega is a star, right? She's the star of this thing. She's awesome.
Well, at this moment, it's you and your beer. How about that?
Right.
So anything on the label, John? We should, because I mean, I like the labels, and you can see the good old South Carolina humidity has built up a little sweat of beads. Bead of sweat, I guess, more accurately.
Yeah.
I love the name.
Yeah, so the Two Hearted is actually a reference to originally a Hemingway short story. It's a river in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, which Hemingway wrote a story about, and it was a story about trout fishing. It's a story about war and remembrance, and the basics of the story is this guy has gone up to the Two Hearted River and fished trout with a buddy forever, and they both went to war, and now he's fishing the stream alone after World War I. And Hemingway, like any good fisherman, that wasn't the stream he actually fished, but it's a really beautiful stream. The beer has got great sort of malt backbone to it, which I think is super important. Veronica would be able to tell you that. You need to balance the malt with the hops, and other than that, it's just 100% Centennial. And it's a favorite beer of mine, and just love making it, love drinking it.
Man, what a head!
The schaum, the foam.
Look at that guy. What am I getting? Over 4 fingers. I mean, if I keep going, I might could get 5.
Oh, there you go.
That is gorgeous. Look at that.
So I mean, think about, if we're making a beer like this, we've actually made a beer at the pub called Cold Hearted, where we're doing some cold, dry hopping in a cold state instead of a warm, active fermentation. And it's a very different beer. I mean, those beers turn out very differently than just the stuff that you, number one, extract, and number two, that change that occurs. I think that Veronica's going to talk about the, kind of the mechanics behind biotransformation. I think it's absolutely fascinating. I can't wait to hear more from her.
Well, let's get her back on the screen.
Thank you, John.
Thank you. It's so good to see you, my friend.
I know. It's so great. Yeah. I mean, you brought up Centennial, and how many IPAs out there, like, touting Centennial as their signature hop? Not much, right? It's like Two Hearted just has stood the test of time. And I really do think that what you're doing with the warm ferment hopping is creating a unique flavor for Centennial that you might see if people are just using it on the cold side dry hopping. So yeah, I mean, just to introduce the idea of biotransformation, I'm sure many of you all have heard of it, but it's this idea of adding when you add hops to active fermenting yeast, within that process of metabolism, certain flavor compounds are biotransformed, right? So whether it's like bound thiols, for example, there might be enzymes there that bring in and break off those thiols, and then you have free thiols, and those create a unique aroma, right? There's still, it just goes from one type to another. And this was, a lot of work was done at Sapporo, actually. And I'm going to be referencing some articles here in the chat, but looking at the presence of geraniol and watching that after transformation transform into beta citronal, right? So you're moving from like a rose kind of aroma to a more lime, fruity citrus aroma. So it's just it doesn't. You might want to think, well, this is great. I'm going to dry hop in the fermenter for all my beers for all my hops. But it actually, like, it's not that way. It's the hops that are high in geraniol, high in those terpene alcohols that you'll see this transformation, right? Or and also high in certain thiols. So we have definitely seen that in some beers, by doing this process, we see no difference. And so what's the point of doing it, right? Like it's a lot more work from a timing perspective to get the timing right. And so with certain beers that are low in geraniol, we have found that it doesn't make a difference. So we can keep the dry hops on the colder end, or you might just get a different aroma. You could also, even with the same hop, I mean, with Centennial, you could do this active ferment hopping and dry hop colder, and you're getting, an even different hop aroma by staging it out in different places. So the temperature plays a big role there as well. Yeah, I'm thinking of, Squeezy Rider is the next beer that I wanted to introduce from Deschutes, and that certainly has brought in this process of biotransformation, timing that hop at like 63 degrees, and it's about, like, for Squeezy Rider, it's about 48 hours into the process, and this has implications on, obviously, your yeast cropping. We've been able to start cropping yeast early, not all of it, but take some before all the dry hop material gets in there and kind of mucks it up. But still have some active fermentation happening in order for for that transformation to occur. And so that's the process for Squeezy Rider. That beer, the malt profile is completely different, so it doesn't have that the caramel in there. It's just wheat and Munich, so really, really light malt bill. So a lot of the fruit and sweetness is coming from the hops, and in this case, we brought in Strata. John, have you worked with Strata much? Are you playing with that? Yeah, it's such a fun hop. Oh my gosh.
Oh my God. It's one of those, I think about those new hops that have popped up, and it's one that just blows up, and it's such a beautiful thing.
I mean, it reminds me of Citra. So that's why, to start out with fresh squeeze and talk about, like, Citra being the protagonist for the fresh squeeze story, right? Like, it was an experimental variety. Everyone was crazy about it. This feels very similar to me with, with Squeezy Rider and having Strata be the protagonist of that beer, and it being pretty early in its life cycle for a hop, right? It's still pretty young hop, I would say, young and hip. But gosh, the aroma of this is also something that you just won't find in another hop. I get a lot of big strawberry, kind of like this tropical fruit punch aroma. That's and a little bit of like that, dank aspect too. And there's no other hop like it. Within Squeezy Rider, we're also using Mosaic and Galaxy, and Mosaic, I believe, is one of those hops that really lend itself to biotransformation. And so within those three varieties, Strata, Mosaic, Galaxy, we're using the hops in the fermenter only. You know, none of those expensive hops are on the hot side. They're all in the fermenter. So we're trying to, you know, get the most we can with those hops, and really found value in the timing of that addition, of being that warmer addition, active ferment. So definitely a unique process to fresh squeeze altogether. And totally different flavor profile. Obviously, I'm not sure how many people out there have access to Squeezy Rider, but if you have them side by side, it's just a completely different beer.
Gee, I wonder who I could reach out to get some.
I mean, I could work on that for sure.
Maybe I'll send you some beer too.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do a trade.
I love that, Veronica. I love that.
Yeah.
Oh, well, yeah, and we've got some here. But John, as we kind of summarize Two Hearted, which is a BJCP style example, I get tangerine. I get quite a different profile than fresh squeezed. A bit more malt. I don't get any cattiness from either one. And Veronica, you mentioned that we might have some, but I guess it's about 3 weeks old, and and maybe some of that's disappeared. I'm not real crazy about cattiness, so I really like what's there. But how would you contrast the two, John?
You know, I do. I think. I love the hop forward nature of the fresh squeeze. I mean, it tastes really fresh. I mean, there's that great sort of grapefruity, resinous, just very present. Beautiful piece there. You know, with Two Hearted, yeah, we've got there's some malt characteristics in there. I do get a little bit of like sort of rose geranium that's in there as well. I would say that one of the other things that Veronica knows very well, and we haven't really talked about, is that the hop selection itself, of like kind of when you're making those selections. And the thing I always liken this to is, I like bananas. Doug, you probably like bananas. Veronica probably likes bananas. But if I like a banana that's nearly black, and you like one that's pretty green, and Veronica likes that perfect yellow one, those are all different bananas. But we've all got the ideal version of what banana is. And so, like, when we're selecting those hops is important too. So, there are, you think hops, dry hopping, it's pretty simple. I mean, there's, the right, as Veronica said, the right hop, the right amount, the right time. Super important.
Yeah, thanks for teeing that up, because I did want to share hop selection technique that we utilize at Deschutes. I mean, just being in such close proximity, you'll notice that we aren't in the hop fields here. This is at the brewery. So, obviously we had a unique year for hop selection. They were sending us samples to the brewery, and we were doing that. But you'll notice that's Scott, our brewing operations manager. You'll notice his phone is next to him. And in order to accomplish what John was just describing, getting a sense from every individual on the hop selection team as to the amount of citrus, the amount of caddy, fruity, spicy, herbal, all these different attributes, and being able to actually scale them so that we aren't influenced by each other in the conversation. Because I can tell you, back in the day, we would influence each other a lot, and we would kind of talk ourselves in circles. And when you're on your 12th lot of Citra, are you making the right decision? So this approach was brought to us by Amanda Benson, our sensory manager. And so she has made it so it's much more data driven, right? We're putting actual numbers on this, and then it's clear as day. I mean, look at this graph then on the other side as you get something like this. This is El Dorado selection. So it's very obvious that 405, 300 is not a lot we're going to select, right? Most everybody was in those other two lots, and we see some differences there, but we're able to keep this data and then utilize a different method that Amanda brought to the ASBC, and that is a hop tea method. So that allows us to, once we've selected our lots for the year, then throughout the year, when you're getting to a lot change, instead of going back to the original analysis that you'll see here, Amanda will make those hop teas And we will reevaluate the aroma there in order to select, okay, this lot of Citra belongs in the brew house versus, the fermenter or something like that. And be able to make some flexes to the original selection. So that is incredibly important. And you're surprised by these hop teas. One surprise that I found was with Bravo. Bravo whole leaf actually ages very, very well. And at times, it was like, oh, well, we have this, 2018 versus, I'll say even older, 2016 versus 2019. Oh, no way anyone's going to select that. But then through blind aroma testing, we found that older Bravo was actually more fruity. And so you're actually doing that as opposed to saying like, oh, we're going to get rid of that because it's old, like actually going through and using the hop tea method has been a really, my more scientific approach to understanding where you want to put your hops in the recipe, right? And to keep it consistent. Let's see, what else do I have to share here? I wanted to also talk about
before you leave that, just briefly.
Yeah.
On the hop teas. Now, I have always heard that a hop tea was a waste of time. But, yeah, I'm hearing it's extremely important. And, I've certainly learned the malt steeping process, which I think is very helpful. So is there a standard for doing hop teas? I know there is one for malt.
There absolutely is. And let me pull it up here. I reference it at the end. So that top one, it's the hop tea sensory method 169 and the ASBC method. So, Amanda worked with others, New Belgium, Hopsteiner, to create this method and make it standardized. So it's like standard temperature, standard time, and like everyone knows, having a set method makes that consistent. And we rely on this a lot, actually. There's hop teas going around bi-weekly, so it's just an extension of the harvest hop selection.
Well, and I wanted to quickly bring up on screen just a comparison of those beautiful beers. I just wanted everybody to see look at the lacing that we've got in there. Just gorgeous beers, and I guess there is some haze difference. Can you touch on that, Veronica?
Yep. I could tell you our method is just a centrifuge method. So this is a pretty tight spin, I would say. It's our brightest set point. Other breweries use multiple ways to clarify their beer, but that is our primary way, is just centrifuging, spinning out the yeast and hop material.
John, would you touch on the haze difference? You've got a bit more haze than Veronica's fresh squeezed.
Yeah, absolutely. At Bell's, like the vast majority of the beers that we make have significant amount of live yeast in them, and we view that as an attribute that we want to have. I will also tell you that in terms of hop filtration methods, a bottle filler is a really good way to filter beer. It's not a really good way to actually get bottles filled. So you need to get the hop material out somehow. So for us, Two Hearted is actually a fairly complex beer. It's a very simple beer, one hop, couple malts, whatever. Really complex beer to make, because what we're doing is we're actually splitting a wort stream and dry hopping, and then needing to spin out those dry hops, but also wanting live yeast to move on, and also creating live yeast for subsequent batches of beer. So Two Hearted's actually in the brewery exists coming out of the brew house as either what we call unhearted or overhearted. And those two beers are blended together late in the process to produce Two Hearted. So basically, it's basically right up our alley. We take something really simple and, totally F it up, make it as complex as possible. But that's just the way we're doing it. But we want the live yeast in there. Live yeast has got some nice attributes that we like, and just kind of a mark of Bell's beers.
Wow. Well, just phenomenal beers.
Oh, I got to tell you that Deschutes and Bell's, pretty aligned breweries. It's great to see each other out in the hop fields during selection, and we were working together for a long time. One of the people at Bell's actually worked at Deschutes, like 25 years ago as like lead brewer there, and Tim Gossick, just an awesome industry guy, and so it's
Loves
really
him.
super cool. Yeah, when we did that collab together, I think he had an awesome time working with you all, Veronica.
He did. It's just so fun to go back to memory lane and get these pictures of everybody looking like babies, and babes in the brew house. But John, I don't know if you've seen this, our pilot system. I'm just going to brag a little and show you something.
I've seen it through the windows, but I've never walked through. But man, it looks gorgeous. Who built this?
Yeah, this is Isan Huber.
Right.
So this is a German-built system. You'll also find it at John I. Haas in their innovation center, and also at Oregon State University. So
and you got like a bunch of parallel fermenters, so you can do split brews. Is that right?
Yeah. That's what I wanted to share in terms of recipe development, because we, are so interested in hops and the hop schedule. This is the system design. So this is, the top part of the pilot brew house, just some kind of, shiny tanks here. But this schematic here, this overview kind of shows this design. So we have a 2-barrel mash lauter and then pre-run tank to collect the wort. And then we split it between 2 kettles, whirlpool, and then the fermenters. And this is because most of our questions are, what is that hop schedule? What's the right hop at the right time? So in order to just reduce the variable of malt, mash, all of that, we split that and really feel confident about, the decisions that we're making in terms of that hop combination or that yeast strain and that hop are giving us what we want, right? So I really am so grateful that we designed it this way, because we are brewing about 250 pilot brews per year, if you can believe it. And it's because there are all these split batches, so you get 4 brews a week off of just 2 brew days. And so we can get to answering those hop related, yeast related questions a lot faster with this design. So it's pretty fun.
John,
go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say to John,
sorry.
Your timing. I don't want to presume you were kind enough to jump on screen, but can you stay a little longer, or do you need to run?
I can be here for a little bit. I got another call coming up. Actually, I'm going to get a chance to talk to Lindsay Barr later tonight. Have socially distanced Zoom cocktail with her and a couple other folks. So
okay,
that's
well,
pretty good.
It is. You stay on as long as you can, and if you just need to disappear, just jump off screen. But
sounds great. I think that Veronica could fill hours with the knowledge she's got. So I may duck out and let her drive this thing, because I'm super interested in learning.
Well, John, thank you for popping in. Cheers, my friend.
Cheers. Great to see you.
Good to see you.
Good to see you, John. Thank you so much for popping by.
Of course. It's a pleasure to see you, buddy.
Yeah, good to see you. Okay, I see Eric in the chat had a question about the pre-run vessel. I'll just hit on that really quick to answer your question, Eric. It's just really a collection tank in order to get a homogeneous wort from the lauter tun and be able to split, equal gravity, totally homogeneous wort stream. We collect it in the pre-run tank. So it's really, a way to prepare us for that split. We also use it in production more as a way to stack brews because of the timing of the lauter tun, being so long. We get it into a pre-run tank before we hit it into the boil in production as well. Yeah, you're very welcome. So let's see, when we're talking about pilot plant, I might linger here for a second, but just to give you a sense of how we utilize, I said we were brewing about 250 brews per year. And that's broken down in in this graph here on what we're doing. It's not all product development. 25% of that is research, and by research, we do a lot of those single hop experimental beers, work with the Hop Research Council. We're working with, just different hop products to test whether, the sales folks are telling us, trying to sell us on a certain variety or a certain, different hop products, and we want to see it in practice. So those research brews will typically inform either creative or product development, but that 25% creative is pretty important, where we don't have, any project boundaries for brewers. We just say, do what your heart desires. And through that, at times we have winners, and at times it's just a way to keep people engaged and excited about brewing beer. Within that, research and creative and any of these process improvements, these are all places to learn. So a lot of these do end up informing product development, but sometimes I think it's surprising to folks to see that only 35% of our beers going through there are actually like a product that we're working on launching in the future. So here's the next slide is just kind of a investigation into Lupomax. This is another hop product that is working to reduce the vegetative material in hops, and it has definitely a sustainability selling point. Obviously for us, we're very interested in flavor and aroma as well, just because you can make it cheaper. It's obviously great, but it needs to taste good. So we go through that split batch of a Mosaic Lupomax T90, right? T90 pellets versus Mosaic Lupomax split brew on the pilot system, and then getting it back into the sensory program and getting those scalings. We see that hop character is slightly elevated with Lupomax. And so this gives us, a little bit of insight on, okay, we're definitely not getting, reduced hop character. And so where can we fit Lupomax and some of those products into the future, right? These are, also just some comments that you can see. Oh, the sensory comments are just like beautiful. They get pretty creative, but with the Lupomax, saw a lot of tropical, but a lot of onion garlic too. And I think that is something that our sensory panel is really sensitive to, but we're needing to talk ourselves into allowing for that fresh, because sometimes certain hops show onion garlic very, very big when they're fresh, and then a week later that falls off. So by the time you're getting your beer into people's hands, it's really that 30-day. So we're trying to create recipes and make decisions on the 30-day hop aroma, as opposed to the 1 week hop aroma, because no one's getting your beer in a week. And so a lot of these things that might show up as a defect up front will turn into something, and so onion garlic at times can move into, something like mango later on at the 30-day mark. Okay, so shows hop selection. I wanted to go back, since I have this open, and just talk to you about our overall. Oh, it's not showing up. Bummer. I wanted to introduce our team, but for some reason in this mode, you don't see it. You see it in this mode though. Okay. Anyways, this is our brewing team. We have that 2 to 1 barrel split system here. We have our brew 2 operations. This is Verno, our pilot brewer, but he's brewing. So you see us throwing whole hops in the kettle here. So the hops that we like to use in whole hop form, Bravo is a great one. Like I said, actually, the age on Bravo in whole leaf has proven to be pretty fruity and delightful, actually. So our whole leaf hops, Citra, Mosaic, Bravo, and Cascade. Then you look at some, our other pub breweries. Our pub system in Portland is 18 barrel, and our Bend pub system is a 10 barrel. And these are places where we get what John was talking about, customer feedback, which is the most important thing, is not just talking to ourselves about our beers and what we think, but getting it out into customers, because it's pretty interesting. Sometimes we might say, you know, gosh, there's tons of onion garlic in this beer, and then you get it out into consumers and they love it. So yeah, that's just like a little introduction to the team, and I'll just escape out of here so that we're not, you know, in PowerPoint, because who wants to do that? How about, should we pour out the other beer, Doug?
I thought you would never ask. Let's jump into that. And my glass is a little oversized, so I'm going to give this 2 pours. Let's start out with this one. All right. Oh, wow. The aroma off that guy.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
It is crazy. It is filling the room.
It's so funny that you just did that, because I did this promotional video for this this beer, and as I was pouring it out, it was like surprising to me, and we're the ones who worked on it. I was just like, oh my God, the aroma of this beer. It's just, Strata is, like I said, it's got this tropical fruit punch dank aroma that is just explosive, and it's such a beautiful hop to work with. It was developed by Indie Hops in partnership with Oregon State University. So it just feels like such a similar story back to Fresh Squeeze, but just completely different way of hopping. So, you know, well, I guess I'll start with the malt on this, since you're pouring it out, and you can see how much lighter that malt is to the other beers behind you. This is just two-row, Munich, and a little bit of wheat. So I say that this beer, even though it's a West Coast IPA, was informed by hazy IPA brewing. And wheat is part of that, right? So bringing in a little bit of softness to the palate, keeping the color low, no caramel malt. And the hops there is Cascade Leaf in the brew house, and that's it. Then we go into the fermenter, and 48 hours into fermentation at 63 degrees, we bring in the Strata, Mosaic, and Galaxy pellets. So that's where we're looking for that biotransformation, getting that big tropical fruit punch aroma. This is about 7% ABV, 40 IBUs. And when you think of IBUs, you might notice that it's not on the package. And that's because, as I said, with only a little bit of Cascade in the brew house, you're not getting that isomerization. So your IBUs aren't as high. However, hot flavor, massive hot flavor, because of that active ferment hopping. It really doesn't give you the big IBUs from the brew house additions. And so we thought, you know, you're just kind of thinking of how misleading that might be for someone purchasing the IPA. Like if they say 40 IBUs, seems kind of low. I really like hops. Nothing about that beer is like anything but hops. It's all hops. So we just kind of said IBUs don't matter with this beer. The hop flavor is there, and I think by moving the hops to the cold side, it's just a different technique that it doesn't lend itself to high IBUs.
Well, I think I have a new favorite hop. El Dorado was my favorite before this, but this is just awesome. I love it. Gosh, that's great. So I expected more haze. When we talked, and again, I expected more haze. Now, and when we talk biotransformation, I associate haze with that. So is that an incorrect assumption?
Yeah, I brought up hazy IPA brewing as informing this bright beer because I would credit hazy IPAs as bringing this concept of biotransformation to the forefront, right? John's been doing it for 20 years. We didn't know that. No one was talking about it. But it was through the hazy IPA brewing that people were looking for low IBUs, big, fruity hop sweetness, right? And through the learnings of how to hop for a hazy, we really brought, both the wheat and that active ferment hopping and the hop selection to this beer, but then made it bright, right? So all we're doing is centrifuging it, just as we do our other beers. This one does bring in a little bit of the blend line, so there is a tiny bit of hazing compared to fresh squeezed. We are using a completely different yeast strain as well. So I will want to touch on yeast. We are using A38, which is called the juice strain, and that is also considered a big hazy IPA yeast. But just through getting it into our centrifuge, a little bit of that blend line in to allow for that yeast to come through, really creates a really beautiful, juicy beer. That yeast strain is great for hazy IPAs. We use it in our fresh haze, and that kind of introduced us to that yeast. And anytime you bring in a new yeast strain, it's like, you have to look at other opportunities to use it. So this has become our house hazy strain, but also we've been using it for this West Coast IPA, a little bit brighter. So I hope that answers your question.
It does, but I guess the color difference. Explain that, because I did not expect the fresh squeeze to be that much darker than the.
So the fresh squeeze has a caramel malt. So C75 is, on the kind of mid-range of caramel malts. We see C10 all the way to, into the 200s. So C75 is kind of right in the middle, but you're getting some obviously big caramel notes there, and not into the more like roasty, toffee type flavors and aromas that you get into the darker caramel malts. So we're bringing in just a little bit of that caramel sweetness in there to balance the beer. With Squeezy Rider, there is no caramel malt. So the color that you're seeing is actually from the Munich malt. That's bringing in a little bit of that color. It's two row Munich and wheat is really it.
Well,
yeah, as Joseph mentioned, wheat is there. Definitely the thought was adding body. Yep.
Yeah, and Joseph's exactly right. The body and smoothness, they're distinctly different, which I guess I really didn't expect, and I guess I didn't expect the color difference, but I just love the differences because each one has a different experience when you sit down and enjoy it. But just phenomenal. I wish I could get it in South Carolina. Unfortunately, we cannot get it in South Carolina.
You need to work on this. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, we do need to work on that. Yeah. But we were able to get the Two Hearted, which is a fabulous beer. But you guys have really taken it up another notch, and I love the flavors. Just fantastic.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Yeah. I think that, I wanted to touch on a little bit of the other hop aroma compounds that are interesting and to keep an eye on when looking at your hop selection and into where you put them in your recipes. And just going back to Two Hearted for a second, people talk about the monoterpene alcohols a lot, and these are really, really important in biotransformation. So Centennial is one of the ones that is very rich in geraniol. So if you're looking for using a hop to get, from geraniol to that beta citronol, look for linalool and geraniol in those hop selections and in which ones you choose to put in your active ferment hopping. Things like El Dorado, Calista, low geraniol. Doesn't matter if you put them in active fermentation, you're not going to really see that biotransformation happen. So, Centennial is like a great one to experiment with getting active firm and getting out of the piney notes that Centennial can throw when it's on the cold side without yeast. Also, with just hop-derived esters, these are bringing in the fruity components of hop flavor and aroma. And Citra and Amarillo are fantastic varieties that bring in these like hop-derived esters. Also, branched chain fatty acids. So this is like a hop like Bravo, which is, I think, one of the least. I don't know. It's not like bells and whistle. It's not a bells and whistles hop, right? It's not like Citra or Strata. People aren't talking about Bravo. It's one of my favorite hops, and I don't think it gets the credit it deserves. But it ages so well, as I mentioned, high in these branched chain fatty acids, bringing in those fruity components to beers that it's just so big in hazy IPA brewing right now. And also the thiols, we touched on thiols, especially with Citra, where on the hot side, they can bring up a little bit more of that caddy, but you can dial that back for sure. There are some other, like the placement of certain hops. When you think about thiols and what they bring to the beer, if you put them in the whirlpool at a little cooler temperature, you might keep some of those thiols in. So I know a lot of brewers are looking at reducing the temperature of their whirlpool, which can be kind of scary to an extent, but it will change that thiol component for hop aroma. So, like I referenced that YCH webinar, super great place to go back to if you want to get really deep into the science. As Doug mentioned, I went to school for biology, so I know enough to make it dangerous, but you're not going to get some hardcore science here, because what I love is having the science, give a reason to why you were finding something, right? So when we saw that, like, using Azacca on the hot side and not getting the passion fruit we were getting, to then see it on the graph and seeing all those like components being super low, it just makes sense. You're like, okay, well, now I understand why, Citra Mosaic on the hot side is fantastic and Azacca is not, So I would say, like, for any of these different hopping techniques, it's not a blanket thing that you can put to all hop varieties, and even hop products, right? So we like to, back in the day when we would give tours, we had a tour guide that would like bellow out, "We are the second largest purchaser of whole hop flowers," which is still true. Obviously Sierra is the first, and our brew house is designed for whole leaf hops. But, nowadays, I like to say that we are working to learn and to use the best hop product for the best part of the process. So whole leaf definitely has its place. And there's certain varieties that really lend themselves to whole leaf. Centennial is not one of those. Centennial is something that ages pretty rapidly, and we use only in pellets. So,
Veronica, we're a little bit past the top of the hour, and a lot of folks just allocate an hour. So first of all, there's at least 13 questions so far. Do you have time to stay and answer these questions?
Absolutely. Yep. I'm sorry I went over.
No. It's okay. But what I wanted to ask you to do as we're kind of wrapping up here is, and I've lined up the beers, and I'll put those on screen, full screen. Do you think you could contrast them? Well, there we go. That was the wrong button. How about that button? Okay.
Yep.
So you had a particular order, and actually I got these out of order. So you wanted to start out with fresh squeeze. You had a particular order you wanted to do these in. And maybe you can explain, just so everybody can appreciate it, because here's the fresh squeezed. This is the two-hearted. And this is the easy squeezy rider, excuse me. So could you contrast those?
Sure. Yeah. But the summary of this is the right hop at the right place, right? So I wanted to start out with fresh squeezed as an example of a very aromatic IPA that utilizes Citra and Mosaic leaf on the hot side, and it is not dry hopped. So by selecting those hops and putting them, in a place that works for that beer, along with a selection of yeast, 1187, and a little bit of that caramel malt, we're creating a very juicy beer, very balanced with the malt profile. Then I wanted to move into Two Hearted as an example of a beer that utilizes a practice of biotransformation in a hop like Centennial, right? Which is a lot of times used in dry hop, and you get a lot of floral, a lot of pine. And, my friend John Mallett, was excited to come and give us some background on why they went to, using a wider fermenter and getting that yeast in contact with the Centennial hops, and getting that transformation into, a little bit more fruitier hop flavor. And then I wanted to end with Squeezy Rider, same type of approach of active ferment hopping, yet with a different hop variety. So with Strata, bringing in a very similar storyline as the Citra hop, but Strata, Mosaic, and Galaxy, all in the fermenter dry hopped warm.
Wow. I knew biotransformation was a hard question to answer, but Veronica, you have all the answers. That's amazing. And John Mallett, thank you for joining us. I think you're still there. I'll bring you up on camera if you don't mind as we begin to wrap up. And if you don't want your camera on, just leave it off. There he is. And John, I'll have to say this was so much better than the last time we did it. It was the middle of winter. I think you had the worst week of your life, and then your computer started a Windows update. Your mic's off, John.
I was going to say it was a complete shit show. Basically, I could hear nothing, so that there was like having to like hold up pieces of paper with notes scrawled on. I mean, it was just like, oh my God. But we got through it.
We did. It was a great event, but this was fantastic. And John, I'll have to say, Veronica has told me a whole new side of you that I did not know, and all your experience in biotransformation. I thought you were just the malt expert.
Yeah. No, I wish I could be the malt expert. I'm not even that. I'm a charlatan.
Well, we're about to jump into the questions. I didn't know if you wanted to hang on and answer any questions, or again, I know you need to leave at some point.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm happy to hang out. Whatever. Obviously, I've been, I love listening, and Veronica's actually prepared for this. You want experts? He's your expert.
Well, let's move into the questions then. And John, and again, when you need to leave, I understand it. Thank you for popping in, though. This was really cool.
Oh, absolutely. Pleasure to be here.
All right, let's jump into the questions. And for those of you looking at the questions, the cool thing is about this platform, everybody gets one vote to vote one question, and the higher it gets voted, the sooner it gets answered. So if you've got one and you look in there in the list, that way we answer the most important question with our audience first. So let's see who has got that. All right, Joseph Hertz. Joseph, wow, by a long ways. All right, so this is the most popular question from Joseph. When using hop additions during fermentation, how much does yeast selection affect the hops? American, Belgian, or German yeasts, for example?
Huge, huge. Some of our split batches are exactly that, just same exact hop bill and 2 yeast strains. We will go back and forth between, our 001 American Ale strain and this A38. And A38, when you want a lot more sweetness, hop sweetness, and more of that fruity character, A38 really, the esters that yeast provides really kind of like melds with that flavor in those hops. But it doesn't, it can also get muddled in some, if you want something more of like a piney beer, that sort of thing, it's the wrong yeast for that. When it comes to Belgian, I mean, Belgian IPAs, I think are pretty difficult to nail because the yeast is just throwing so many different esters out there to compete with the hops. Saisons as well. But you know, with the hop selection for that, if you're trying to match fruit with fruit, I kind of tend to go more on spice, using hops as like an addition of that type of profile. So you're not competing with the fruity esters that a Belgian or a Saison yeast might bring to the table. You're just adding another layer of complexity and not trying to bring that, you know, to the forefront with your hop selection there. With German yeast, actually one of my favorite beers is Mountain Standard. I don't know if people know that, but that I haven't heard directly from them on this, but I've been told that is a Helles strain. So they are able to get a huge hop aroma off of a German strain. So we're definitely looking in that direction. We're also doing a lot of work on lager strains fermented a little bit warmer. Because of the long fermentation of a lager, we're seeing if that biotransformation can occur for that length of time, right? So that's some current work that we're doing in our pilot brewery.
You know, I think about Veronica. You could comment on this, but you think about like London Ale 3. You know, if you're making hazy beers and the ability to pull hop character forward and produce a stable haze. Like those yeasts are really important. I mean, and I also got to tell you, Veronica, I don't think I've ever heard anybody say that they thought the Belgo IPA sucks in quite as diplomatic a manner as you. I'm usually a little more direct about that. I hate that fucking style.
Yeah, I mean, it really doesn't sell either, so it has that going for it too.
Yeah, exactly. There's like one beer and you know, from Boulevard that I love that's got, you know, hops and some of those Belgian characteristics, but other than that, I've not tried every beer, so maybe if somebody's making beer out there, I haven't tried your beer, but for the most part, don't do that.
Exactly. There are better yeasts. Yeah, there are better yeasts.
So, John, did I overhear you say a Jamaican hazy?
No, just hazy beer. No, so if you're making like a New England IPA, yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
I thought I heard something there, and I thought, what is a Jamaican hazy?
Well, I guess I'm going to be making that on Tuesday, right after Veronica on Monday.
There you go. We just invented a new style.
Yeah, you were here with the creation.
Oh, well, Joseph, what a great question. Thank you for the wonderful answer. Reed has our next question. Pretty thorough one here. When dry hopping, how much thought goes into how each of the top 5 oils will create the aroma and flavor you're trying to create? What I'm trying to ask is how closely you research the oils in the hops you're choosing. Which oils do you feel have the most impact when you dry hop? And is there a difference on the impact on flavor and aroma depending on when you dry hop?
I will honestly say that we don't look at oils when making the selection. We go on a practical side, right? So we make a decision on saying, okay, we're going to do these 3 hops in these 3 amounts, and then taste the beer, and then make a decision on what we want to amplify and reduce. And I almost use the science as to like back up my decisions as opposed to driving my decisions in recipe development. John, I know I see you nodding. I don't know. Would you agree? It's like we're definitely not looking at like the data and saying, okay, because of this oil content, I'm going to do 60% Citra and 20% Azacca. You know, you're kind of using it as a way to reinforce your decisions. And it's also, I almost feel like, oh, it's so cool, you know, like what we were actually tasting, they're finding, you know, the reasoning behind it is science. It's not magic, you know?
Yeah, I'll say, you know, we may buy more Centennial than any other brewery in the world. You know, I don't know that, but we may. And I'll tell you that anybody who makes a single hop beer, I think, is stupid, like us. They're kind of problematic. And I think about especially the really great flavors, hop forward flavors you're getting from these modern American hops. They all kind of want a dance partner. They want to play with others. And at that point, you've got some characteristics from this and some characteristics of that. And at that point, that artistry of like, oh yeah, these work well together. That's what drives it. It's not, we don't have a spreadsheet that we just dump stuff in and out pops the hop ratio based on oils. It's very sensory driven.
Yeah, I'd also reference back to that hop tea is where we would be making decisions like that also, is using that sensory tool as opposed to oil analysis.
I got to do one of those hop tea things. I've done the malts, but I got to do the hop teas. But I like what Ryan says. He said a Jamaican IPA would be dank for sure. And
But Doug, I remember there was one of these that I joined. I don't go to a ton of these, but there was the one where Cohen was talking about, from New Belgium, was talking about dank, and you were first learning about kind of the dank aromas, and that was some good webcasting. That was entertaining as hell, man.
that was quite an experience, but what a wonderful experience. But I like Jamaican IPA. That's a better name than dank and dankness and all this other thing. I think we might be on to something there. All right, next question. And Reed, that was a fantastic question. This one is short, but it is sweet. Ryan has got this. How many days, depending on the hop, is ideal for dry hopping? So in other words, does it vary depending on the hop that's chosen?
It does vary, I'd say. I brought the example of a beer called Wowza, which is El Dorado Calista. And we brought that hopping. It was at at the fermenter right before transferring to the bright tank. So it was definitely colder and less contact time because it was low alcohol. A little bit less contact time on these lower alcohol beers is definitely have found that. But by moving it up and having a little bit more contact time, we were thinking of bringing that biotransformation to the Wowza recipe. It didn't matter. It didn't amplify the hop flavor at all. So with El Dorado and Calista, I'd say those two varieties I haven't found to be gaining anything by using them on the warmer fermentation temperatures. But with Mosaic and Amarillo and those types of varieties, Centennial, we've learned, right? A little bit more contact time and that warmer fermentation temperature does work for those types of hop varieties. Did you ask how many days? Was that also?
Yeah. Oh, that's behind the screen. All right, let's try that again. All right. So the question was, do you have a chart for that? Because I think, it sounds like the different varieties dry hop for different periods of time.
I don't have a chart for it, but I am going to reference Scott Janish's work because this is what he does. He compiles all this science and creates awesome charts for people to use. So seriously, if you are looking for those types of kind of easy reference points he even has oils. If you're interested in what hops have the most, oils, he has them all charted out. Go to scottjanish.com and you will find a lot of really great hop resources.
Well, Scott's going to be excited. You've referenced him a bunch of times.
He's amazing.
And I love his work, but I think you're the first program that has referenced him so many times.
Yeah. His book just came out and we're just at the brewery, we're kind of geeking out about it. So it's top of mind right now, I guess.
Next
I'm
question.
so glad so there's someone that does that, right? Because it's like, who has the time to make the graphs? No, like we're on to the next recipe. We're wanting to, just explore. Scott's taking the time, so I'm just glad he's doing it. So, people like me don't have to.
So you may have to help me with the pronunciation, Veronica. Katia Martinez? She asked, what...
Katia, is it Katia?
Katias. Okay. What you do any type of chemical analysis on hops, or is it just sensorial analysis? So chemical analysis versus just sensorial.
Yeah, we just do sensory and then IBUs. We also do like qualitative analysis through GCMS. So it's not telling you like the exact amount of a compound, but you could almost create like a fingerprint to reference like, okay, we made this lot change for fresh squeezed and Citra. What does the GCMS tell us on like comparing them? However, you might see big changes and you might not find them in sensory. So why freak out about it? It's always like sensory that's going to tell you, whether it's something you need to worry about, even when you have like something like a GCMS on your side to tell you, qualitative compound analysis.
John, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, Veronica's doing a great job at this.
All right. He's at a loss for words.
Crash the party, man.
He's at a loss for words. That's a rare thing. All right. Next question. Is there a difference between just hazy and or juicy IPAs?
I mean, you're asking my opinion, right?
Yeah.
This is my opinion. I mean, I just think juicy is a flavor qualifier, so I would even describe fresh squeezed as juicy. It's not hazy, obviously. And it's, it's really also not hopped like a hazy. I think the juiciness that fresh squeezed provides is this like synergy of Citra mosaic leaf, 1187 yeast, and that caramel malt. It's all coming together, to provide that juiciness that like when you drink it, you almost feel like this, like you're salivating. So it's like creating something in your mouth that is like creating that juicy flavor. Hazy is just all about like, the visual aspect of it. So that's how I would compare the two.
Yeah, the optical hazy is the optical pathway of light disrupted.
Yeah.
And the answer there is yes. Now, I'll tell you that there's a lot of hazy beers that don't taste hoppy. So, for example, when I describe a Weizen beer as hazy, absolutely. Does it, but somebody puts like New England hazy on a label. Now my expectation as a beer drinker is it's going to be pretty hop forward. Juicy, again, hop forward. I do think that, that sort of New England style needs to be both hop forward and hazy for it to meet the expectations of the beer drinker. And a lot of that haze comes from hop, but also some of that haze comes from the carbohydrate source selection. So whether that's, oats or particular way that the wheats are being used or something like this, and also hops. And so a beer that ends up with a shit ton of hops in it tends to not drop bright. And that's really what I think that people, I think it's really interesting that when people are judging a beer, like, I'm not saying like in a judging thing, but when they walk up to a bar and somebody pours them something, if somebody poured you a beer and it had absolutely no head at all, you'd be like, something's not right. So visual assessment of something is a clue. Like, a glass of water has foam on it. So would I expect a beer to take, if it was completely clear and no foam, to be malty? No. Would I expect a beer that's hazy to be hoppy? Well, kind of, yeah. If that's the intent. So again, like I think they're kind of nebulous and not well-defined marketing. In some ways, like marketing-driven terms. that give clues to the end beer lover of what the experience that they're about to embark on should include. So, if I ordered like a hazy American IPA and it came out as the best Bavarian Weizen beer, I wouldn't be happy. I may be having one of the best beers I've ever had in my life, but it's not what I ordered or what I thought I ordered.
Yeah.
So a lot of times you'll see advertising that it's unfiltered, as if unfiltered provides that haze and therefore you get more flavors. But what I'm hearing you say is absolutely not.
Well, I mean, if you're filtering a beer, you're taking out, the active filtration is putting it through something small enough that it's pulling out those small particles that allow it to be clear. Now, some of those small particles may impart either body or hop character or whatever else. So, yeah, I mean, the haziness of the beer does relate to it, I think, a little bit.
Okay, you just got to be careful.
You got to be confused as a brewer as to what we're doing with marketing.
Well, that's probably always been true, and it goes back before a lot of hazy IPAs.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think that they've got a really tough job of like, how are you trying to set the scene so that the beer is successful for somebody who's walking up to the bar or to the supermarket and saying like, here's what I want, and here's what I'm getting. So
yeah, what's the experience?
Yeah. Well, Sean has the next question. What is your favorite hop combinations for New England IPAs?
New England's. Well, I am a big fan of Amarillo, and I'm going to bring up a hop that is very polarizing to people because if you have comments on Sabro, I'd love to hear it. Sabro is one of those hops that I hear people either love or hate, and I like it very tiny brush in a New England IPA because it has like a vanilla kind of woody sweetness to it. If you get a little coconut, and in those beers, I think it does have a place, but it can be very overpowering. So you have to use like a tiny, tiny, tiny amount. But that's like probably one of my favorite hops, to be like a tiny spice of Sabro, and you're going to get something pretty yummy. Mosaic, Citra, Amarillo, and Simcoe. Simcoe is high up there for kind of a big candied orange that we get from when you use it warm in the fermenter.
Yeah, I mean, right now I'm super fascinated with like Idaho 7, Strata, maybe a little Mosaic pulled together. Those are really interesting hops right now. Again, you want to be adding these things together. The Sabro, I think, kind of can get towards the Sriracha Ace, like super kind of dill,
yeah,
character. So again, it's like a spice. You want it in there so that people are like, oh, that's interesting, but they're not like cinnamon.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a hop character that has dill, as in dill pickle or dill spice.
Herbal. Dill. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm glad I've avoided that one.
Well, again, these are small quantities. Fantastic. You're making a beer with all of that. It's like it makes a statement, but
Yeah, and that's Sriracha Ace, right? That's harvest time, right? And you go dill lemon, and trying to find, if you want a little bit of both, like getting that harvest window in the middle and choosing the lots that come from that harvest window is pretty fascinating. How that can change in just the day that you harvest the hops.
Oh my God! For years we would go down and see one of the great families of hop growing, and they would put out like every day's like for the whole harvest window on paper plates, and we'd go through and we'd rub like, oh yeah, and this was a tradition that Vinny and Natalie from Russian River and Bell's crew would do together, and it was really a super fun thing. But you'd see like across this whole spectrum of just how much the hop changed and how it was going to manifest itself in beer. I mean, selection windows, super important. And clearly the work that, the Veronica was showing of the way that they're approaching that at Deschutes. I mean, great access, really valuable partners, and help to shape how hops in America are grown and harvested,
Ernie asked, can you speak about adding hops later in fermentation, like at about 40 or 45 degrees F?
Yeah, I think that where if you want to get truly West Coast and get like the pine, resiny, floral, those types of characters, you want to add that layer. That's where you would choose hops to add at that point. You do get a little bit more vegetal, character at that point as well, and hop bite. So it has its place, right? But with customers going right now so much into the fruity, juicy, that I think it's just has to be the right, if it's a triple IPA that you want super complex, it might be 2 different hop schedules, some active ferm and some post fermentation to get some of that resiny character to maybe balance out something that big, But that's how I would think about the cold side hopping.
All right. Now we're going to have to kind of do rapid fire at this point. We've got about 20 minutes, and it looks like we have 8 questions. So Kevin asks, how do you maintain quality of hops between crop batches?
The storage is cold stored. As a whole leaf hop brewery, we have a big hop cooler down at our lower warehouse, and then we have a hop harvest cooler, and everything is just kept very, very cold. You don't want to get locked into the hop storage cooler because you would freeze to death. I mean, seriously, when we were doing like inventory, everyone's bundled up in beanies and big jackets. So it's all about cold storage. When it comes to opening bags, we definitely vacuum seal any pellet bag that is open. When we dry hop, we formulate recipes to use whole bags, so we're not dealing with that baloney. But certainly in the pilot and other smaller systems where we want to, we have to use partial bags. It's about getting the oxygen out and getting it cold as soon as possible. I think it's really about temperature.
All right. Our next question. Eric asks, what is the best way to introduce dry hops in a conical fermenter? Just dump? Do you need to CO2 purge first?
It's funny, we're doing a lot of trials of this right now. Because there's our main process is utilizing an AMCO system. So it's basically a vessel that's external to the fermenter, pressurized, and it macerates the hops and gets them all in there as quick as possible. And then you basically do like a theoretical tank turn on mixing the hops, like getting them all up in the fermenter. We're testing what is like called like burping, right? Like getting CO2 in there, because when you do cut the hops up, there could be potential of them dropping and not having enough contact time. In conversations with other brewers that use whole pellets and drop them off into the top, some brewers believe that just through the light ferment, like the hops start kind of unraveling themselves. And so it's a different type of contact. And so we're kind of looking at that right now, actually, because we have some fermenters that we can dump over the top, and we have some fermenters that there's no freaking way in hell we're going to get up to the top of that fermenter. It's just a safety issue. And, when it comes to just like the overall poundage, we're talking like, what we're going to put 200 pounds on a, scissor lift and get it up there. It just doesn't make sense from a production standpoint. So I think, looking at other ways to continue to get the hops in contact with, the rest of the beer is something we're looking at right now.
Yeah, I think that, some of the other factors there, especially in production size brewing, you'd start dropping hops into a beer that's fairly fermented, and there's all this CO2 that's in kind of a metastable state. You drop them in there, they're little nucleation sites, and you can end up, and there's some epic pictures on the internet of like the hoppy beer geyser just shooting out and hitting the ceiling, because basically it kind of lit off a fire, firework there. I'll say that the purging of CO2 is kind of dependent on when you're adding it as well. So beer, when it's an active fermentation, has got yeast that's in there. That yeast is a voracious consumer of oxygen. I mean, like, I think if you totally saturated a beer with oxygen and high ferment, all of that oxygen would be consumed by the yeast in a matter of seconds. So, you contrast that with a beer that has finished fermentation, is cold, now it's in a fairly static state, that drops out. Again, I would throw there that, what are the convection currents, and the ability to sweep those hops. There's actually some work that's been done, and for a while now, about the compaction of the pellets themselves. How tight are they? So if you made these little hard, glassy, tiny, like ball bearings that just fall straight to the bottom of the fermenter, it's kind of like running your kid past the shower in 30 seconds. You want them to be in there and doing their magic. So I think there's a lot of factors there, but for me, the oxygen concern that was raised, that can be mitigated by dry hopping and active fermentation.
Next question, Sam asks, we've tried biotransformation additions in the past. It has cleared up our beers, and we intended to stay hazy. We haven't tried this in quite some time since we just made some haze by improving the grist changes. But now we're nervous to try again and risk clearing the haze. Any insights into this effect and how to avoid it for New England IPAs? Is it possibly yeast playing a role?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking of our consideration was more malt selection based, bringing in things like there's a Canadian oat malt out there, and just making your grist bill, adding things like unmalted wheat and things that promote haze in the beer. We actually just thought, okay, why don't we just take all the kettle findings out because we want haze. And we ended up putting them back in because it allowed us to drop the larger particulate in the brew house and keep the smaller particulate, in the beer. Let's see, you were talking about, your question is just, fearing going back. I mean, I haven't really thought the active ferment is going to clear up your beer. I guess my gut sense is that there's probably other factors at play, as opposed to that being something that is either making yeast fall out, or getting polyphenol complexes drop out together. So I would say try it. I'd honestly just say go back, and now that you've made some different, made some changes in your malt bill, or look at your kettle findings, go back to trying it, because I think it's worth it. Obviously, lots of people are doing it in their hazy beers.
I'd also recommend looking at that yeast strain again. Like London L3, pretty impressive in terms of the difference of what the haze that it carries over.
So the answer to the question is it's maybe haze driven. Yeast driven.
Again, it's yeast, it's hops, and it's malt or other grains, right?
Yeah.
And maybe even water. Let's throw water in there too. We'll just get them all, right?
All right. I think we answered that one the best we could, Ryan. Next one is Ryan. Are you guys using any cryo hops or lupulin powder on the cold side of hopping or in the fermenter?
Yeah, we are using it actually in a new beer. I'll show you. Haztron, new member of the Fresh family. So yeah, this is an Imperial Hazy because obviously you got to have one of those in your portfolio. So 7% is not enough. We need to go 8 and 9. There's people out there that want that. So with that, we're using Simcoe Cryo, and we're using it in active dry hop. So we're using some pellets, some experimental varieties, and then just getting a little bit of that Simcoe Cryo in active room.
John, you guys using any cryos?
Not in any of our like large production beers, but we play with them. We got similar sort of scalable pilot systems that we are constantly popping stuff out with. So,
any lupulin powders?
They're all kind of in that similar vein.
Thing.
They're all produced in a similar way. I mean, I think one of the real advantages to them as well is the sort of like putting them in the kettle, because you drop the amount of hop material which tends to absorb wort, and then you get better utilization through to the fermenter. You're not throwing so much away. You also don't get I think sometimes when I'm drinking beers that are super, super hopped in certain areas, that you get a real vegetal, think green pepper tobacco kind of characteristic. And those are nice at some level, but maybe not at high levels. So those tend to help. Those products tend to help with that.
For some people more than others. Jerome asks an interesting question. Could have a long answer, but why don't we try and keep it short? Can you talk IBUs a little bit more? Is IBU really an accurate way to describe a hoppy beer, or does it really just cause confusion with consumers, since IPAs are much more about hop fruitiness flavor than pure bitterness?
Yeah, I just think I've seen the IBU conversation evolve over time. I don't think they matter anymore because they're not telling the customer what we're wanting to tell them. Back in the day when we were trying to wallop each other with as much IBUs, we can get into a beer like, oh no, let's hit that 100, let's get those 90s. We were wanting to tell our customers, oh, if you like hoppy beers, go for that high IBU. And so it became along with alcohol, a way for someone to scan the menu and say, oh, this is something that I like because I know this about myself. Now, like I said, that Squeezy Rider, it's a 40 IBU beer because there's hardly any hops in the brew house, and you're not getting those isomerized alpha acids. So it doesn't come out in using the process of the IBU method. What you're tasting isn't shown through that process. So again, that communication point with the customer, we're not telling them that this is a very hoppy beer with that 40 IBU number. There's perceived bitterness versus analytical bitterness, right? And so with Squeezy Rider, there's big hop presence. So the perceived bitterness or just perceived hop flavor is very, very high. We can't really put a number on that because, we have a lab spitting out a number. So that's just ethically, we would have to put we feel like we would have to put that right number. But instead, I'm almost thinking we need a hop flavor gauge. That's just okay, if you're into hop flavor, this is how big it is. And it's just a different kind of tool to show the customer that your beer is along the lines of what they want to experience. So in my personal opinion, IBUs don't matter anymore. And that method really isn't helping us out on telling us what that beer is going to taste like.
I think you look at some of the work that, say, John Paul May of SS Steiner, great hop chemist, great hop company, have done around the analytical versus so you can measure it, but do you taste it? And there's some different components which get in at different levels. And then that's compounded on the fact, on top of, there is bitterness, but bitterness is different than the hop flavor that customers, beer lovers, are really looking for today. So you can have something that had zero hop flavor, it was super bitter, and people would be like, this is terrible, or vice versa as well. So I think the BU is important, but as an analytical tool for process control in the brew house. Yeah. Not in communication to the beer drinker about you're going to like this beer or not.
So yeah, and you even think of the colder hopping, you're going to get a higher perceived bitterness through that resiny character that you're going to get. And And that's also misleading too. If somebody sees a low bitterness, low IBU because it's not coming out analytically, but that brewer decided to go cold dry hopping, and there's lots of resin there and hop bite. So yeah, it's not helping. I think that communication.
Yeah, as an industry, it's probably something we need to use less.
Mm-hmm.
It's not very sexy either.
No. And it's not very sexy. Jerome, great question. Now we're down to just our last couple of questions. Do you think there's anything special about hop drippings? This is when you remove the hop bags from the fermenters. That sounded like an evil laugh.
Well, it's because it's taking me back to when, I was a production brewer, and we used to, we had these big tea bags, right? I'll call them tea bags. These big bags,
like pillowcases, right?
Totally, right? And just from a safety perspective, what a nightmare. You're opening up a vessel that was pressurized, full of CO2, and then you're sticking your head in to grab this heavy bag full of dripping, sticky, you can hardly get it out. I mean, that's why I'm laughing, because it just took me down that memory of that. I mean, the problem there, it was just consistency, because as you started, getting your bottling line pulling from that bright tank, the bottom of the tank definitely had a different, more hoppy, drippy flavor than the top. And so for obvious reasons, on being safety and all that, but consistency was definitely huge on moving away from bright tank whole leaf hopping. But yeah, for sure, gosh, that's gold. But if you can't keep it consistent, it really doesn't do you that great unless you're squeezing it out, as a brewer, using that as your prize for having to do that task.
Back in the mid-90s, I ran a brewery in the mid-Atlantic in Washington, D.C. area, and I had a third shift brewer who was pulling hop bags out and just, wrestling these, they're just cumbersome and nasty and all this. So he finishes up his shift. It's now 6 o'clock in the morning. He's driving back into town to his apartment, and
yep,
rolls down the window. The cop walks up and he's like, "Officer, this is not what you think," because he just reeks. They're step out of the car. He blew a 0-0.
Yep.
Very, very nice. But it was just one of those things you just covered in this crap trying to get
this is so real. I used to always worry about getting pulled over after a shift when I had to pull out dry hop.
Oh my God, Kenny had such a funny story about that. I was yeah, sure. You're out of the car now, pal.
Yeah.
Well, I brought it up on purpose because I know at Sierra Nevada in Mills River, when they brew the Celebration Ale, those are quite coveted. Those hop drippings. I have never had any, but I have seen them handle them with great care.
Yeah, so we do that also with our barrel drippings.
Okay, sounds like the same.
Yeah, they're handled with care as well.
All right, we have less than 5 minutes. We have 3 questions, and we want to end ceremoniously and not unceremoniously. But I do have a hard stop. Henry asks, considering a pound of hops turns into 5 pounds of wet hops, do either of you use any specialized methods or processes to minimize your losses?
John, you're nodding, so take it.
Yeah, I would say that 5 pounds of hops would turn into 5 pounds of wet hops, and a centrifuge dries them out. So if you're removing the hops through a centrifuge, you're actually being very efficient versus just having them kind of fluffy and wet. So, it's a more efficient process.
Yeah, I guess I'm confused. Are you talking about wet, fresh hop, wet hop brewing?
I think about, if you had if you took like a pound of hops and you fully hydrated them in beer and then you pulled them all
Got
out,
it.
you would it'd be like a pound of hops and 4 pounds of quality beer. But if you send them through a centrifuge, then the stuff that's coming out of the centrifuge is actually fairly dry, so you're getting most of that out.
Yeah. We don't have a wort centrifuge, so we definitely lose some with the leaf hops. However, we also have like a ratio of leaf to pellet that we have to kind of stay in because of the brew house design. And if we go outside of that and went all pellet, we'd actually have a lot of other problems. We'd be sending trub, to the fermenter. The brew house isn't made for pellets, and so the whole leaf hops actually help in some way to keep things kind of moving, processing, and then the brew house happy. Otherwise, like, it can spit up in certain places. I'll just say that.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about finished, post fermentation beer. So
yeah. Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, got it. Yeah.
Thank you, Henry. Elliot asked the next question: what additions are you planning for the future, and how soon will it be available?
Well, I kind of teased this Hazetron, right? We're building the fresh family, so building this portfolio of IPAs that, with Fresh Squeeze taking that inspiration point as like letting the hops tell us, like what's exciting, what new products are out there. Hazetron is the place where we're bringing in some new experimental varieties, bringing in that Simcoe Cryo. We're thinking where we're playing with like a triple. What does that look like? And I think in formulating that beer, we're super excited about just going like, all right, what's the best hop to use on the hot side? And what's the best hop product, right? So extracts are going to play a bigger role with this triple, because as you get higher in ABV, your shelf life is affected. So, we want to keep shelf life top of mind with like our triple. So what are the best hops that have like the most survivables in the hot side? And then utilizing some more of these advanced hop products like, either aroma extracts or lupulin powder, cryo, all that in bringing in active ferment hopping with that. So, but yeah, those are the main two. I think that is that you'd probably see quickest from us. Hazetron is starting to roll out right now, so it'll get out into the wider footprint next year. And that triple is in pilot, and also working on just playing with fruit additions and hops. And, that can get challenging because, hops are already expensive. Fruit is expensive. And so you want to ensure that you're elevating and adding something that like plays well together and isn't like clashing. So actually that squeezy rider started out as like, I wanted to take Strata as like, oh my gosh, this hop smells like fruit punch. Why don't we make like a fruit punch IPA, like make it red? Like, I know this is great. Like make it look like fruit punch. And then honestly, the more fruit punch we added, it like reduced the hop. And so then we like went like the opposite way. We're like, okay, let's take it all the way out. And it had the most fruit punch aroma without any actual fruit. So it's like playing with those combinations of fruit and hops, I think are continuing to be in our pilot.
John, how about bells as we wrap up? Because I think that'll be our last question.
I think Veronica did a fantastic job.
He's not going to tell us any of his secrets.
No, dude, we're playing with fruit and beers is super interesting. Like fruited sours are right now are something we've been playing a lot in. That's great. Just hoppy beers, happy hop beers.
Happy hop beers.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we are literally 45 seconds to a hard end because I pay for 2 hours, 120 minutes. They cut me off. So that's a good thing. First time ever, we're going to have somebody that's going to be in our next week's event that's on Shark Tank tomorrow. So Aaron Walls with Beer Maker. Check it out. Ought to be fun. John, Veronica. Oh, wow. This was a lot of fun. Thank you so much. Cheers.
Cheers. I got one.
Cheers.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Veronica. Good night. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Good night. Thank you.